Okay, as I was saying, the comic basically was the last vesture, and basically an expansion of what many fans would say SatAM could have been, had, like I mentioned towards the end of part one, had it continued on as long as or as long, not as it did, but as long as Power Rangers did. So, and that again is why the comics lasted. And now I'm not going to give all the credit to the SatAM fan base. I'll give credit to the fans of the games as well. I'm pretty sure I can relate with this not relate with this, but I'm pretty sure people can relate with this when I say that when Sonic Adventure came out in 1999, that's when a lot of the game fans, in my opinion, started being attracted to the comics as well. Yeah, Endgame was probably one of the most talked about sagas in the comic book industry at the time in '97, and that's probably what attracted some people as well, and I'll give credit there. But in my opinion, when Sonic Adventure came out in 1999, that's when things really started to pick up for the comic as far as game fans were concerned, because basically you had basically later on you had the adaptation to Sonic Adventure. That's right, you did. You had the adaptation to Sonic Adventure coming up real soon. And in between that, you had this kind of world tour going on. And in between there, you had these subtle hints that something big was going to go down eventually. Some kind of big reveal was going to happen. And again, like I said, Endgame helped kind of usher in the new fan base, the new readers, if you will, to see what was going to happen next. And as word came across, the wire, slowly but surely, in my honest opinion, there were some of the newer gaming fans that started to gain interest in the comic as to why people were talking about it, why people wanted to read it. And again, like I said, there was all these subtle hints during the World Tour saga that kind of gave you an idea something big was going down, and boy did it ever give you that indication that something big was going down. I mean, something really big. And it just proved it. It just proved it with the reveal of Robo Robotnik, who would later go on to be the Dr. Robotnik 2.0, or as he's known by many fans nowadays as basically Eggman. So again, for that to happen, and then later on you had the Sonic Adventure story being, teased about, talked about, being promoted, and eventually happening. To me, the game itself is what drew fans in. It was done to help slowly draw fans in, because they probably wanted to see if these characters if these new designs were going to be eventually shown in the comic, and they were. I mean, yeah, they came up with kind of a unique way for Sonic to gain his green-eyed look, if you will, his modern look. They came up with a unique way for Amy to get her look. But overall, you knew basically Sonic Adventure and the redesigns that some of the characters had there, you eventually knew that was going to draw fans into the comic, because they wanted to see if those redesigns would show up in the comics. And like I said, they eventually did. And what I think really helped keep them on board for a while was the fact that they knew that if these redesigns were going to show up in the comics, because they were slowly being drawn into there by the suggestion of by the friends and other fellow gamers and such, and fellow Sonic fans and it all, that eventually they knew something else could be, that there could be more done with this comic than just, okay, we see the redesigns that the characters got in Sonic Adventure, what else can we get? And eventually they ended up getting a big ass, and excuse my language, but a big ass adaptation, in my opinion, of Sonic Adventure. Basically an adaptation that, in my honest opinion, I'm sure some may or may not agree with this, lived up to what the game was. I mean, the game was basically touted as the biggest adventure Sonic ever had, thus the name. So you needed an adaptation to live up to it, and you know, give Archie Comics all the credit in the world back then. They came up with an idea to really live up to what the game was, because not only did you have the story kind of span from issue to issues, from basically, I think it was, what, yeah, about 78 or something, you know, 78, 78, 79, something like that, and all the way up to about 84, 85, but then you add in, with those issues, you add in a 48-page Sonic Adventure comic to be part of that. And again, it shows you that they basically tried to attempt to live up to what the game itself was. And to me, that's what helped bring the gaming fans, the fans of the games, into the comics as well. Because not only did they hear about the comics from the friends, family, and fellow Sonic game fans, but also with Sonic Adventure having these redesigns, giving the characters like Sonic and Amy, you know, these modern redesigns, if you will, as well as Tails and Eggman, like I said, basically giving these modern redesigns. You know, fans wanted to see if these modern redesigns would show up in the comics, and again, like I say, eventually they did. But, you know, besides that, you know, that leading them there, they also wanted to see what else would happen, what other characters would show up. And, you know, you eventually had characters like Big show up. You had characters like Tikal. Well, they both showed up in the Sonic Adventure adaptation. You had Rouge show up eventually. You had Shadow show up. You know, excuse me. And down the line, in recent years, in the recent past decade, you know, you had the Chaotix as well, but they showed up at the same time as Knuckles did. But you also had characters like Cream. You had Marina. You had Vanilla. You know, heck, you even had Shade show up in the comic. I'm not lying. You had Blaze. You have Silver. You know, you have all these characters that fans, you know, that debuted in the games, and like I said, with Sonic Adventures, fans of those games who started getting into the comics, or were getting into the comics because of the games, especially Sonic Adventure, in my opinion, wanted to see if these characters would show up there, and eventually they did. You know, eventually they did. Now, the thing is, to me, the reason the comic has lasted for as long as it has, like I said in part one, is because of the SatAM fans, and the fact that the comic was the last vestige, is the last piece of SatAM, and more of an expansion of what it could have been had it still been animated and lasted as long as, like I said, Power Rangers did, if not maybe Monday Night Raw. But, you know, you also have to give credit to the game fans, because in my honest opinion, it was the Sonic Adventure game that really drew them in. Like I said, yes, they started hearing about it, you know, courtesy of the friends, courtesy of the fellow fans, the families, and fellow gamers. But to me, Sonic Adventure really drew them in. It really drew them in, because they knew the comic. They'd seen probably the comic or read it when they would go to comic stores, but they probably were wondering, like anybody would wonder when a franchise of some kind is adapted, if the redesigns or if certain characters were going to show up in there. And they did. And they did, and it's what's helped the comic last as long as it has. Now, throughout the 20 years, has the comic had its own division of fans, basically its own different fan bases here and there? Yes, no doubt. I mean, heck, now in recent years, you could see that it's had its own divisions of fans, its own fans divided on what they like about it and what they don't like about it. But that's to be expected with any kind of fan base. You have to come to expect that with any kind of fan base out there in the media. I mean, you can. There's no doubt you can expect that with the Spider-Man comics. You can expect. I mean, for example, there'll be fans that'll be split, believe it or not, on One More Day. You'll have fans split on that. You'll have fans split on 700. You know, on issue 700 of Spider-Man. You know what I'm saying? You know, you have fans split on that decision, on those kind of decisions. You know, the same with X-Men. You know, Superman. You know, stuff like that. You'll have fans split on a lot of these decisions and divided and have their own divisions on how they feel about what's going on in the comics. And, you know, that's totally to be expected. So Sonic is not the only one that has that kind of situation going on for the past 20 years, if not in the most recent years. Now, has the comic in 20 years made some good story decisions, or story arc decisions? Yes and no. You know, there have been some good ones and there have been some bad ones. Endgame obviously is at the top, whether you like the guy who wrote it or not, as probably the best story arc, even though it was 4 issues, but best story arc ever done. There's no doubt that right now the current story arc, if you look at it, is probably going to go down as the longest story arc in the history of the comic. You know, so, you know, obviously, yeah, it's had its ups and downs. I mean, personally, I liked Endgame. I really did. You know, I can't think of anybody that didn't. Well, maybe a few people, but, you know, that's to be expected. But me, honestly, I found no problem with it. You know, I think if I was to pick out one story arc that, even though I read it and I enjoyed it at times as probably not being the best, I'd have to go, and I know I'm going to get some hate for this. But I'd have to go with the Iron Dominion year-long story arc. Because, essentially, you really didn't do much with the villain except have her take control of Bunny's cybernetics, have her take control of the nanites in some ways, have her, for even just less than 1 issue, take control of Nicole. But still, besides that, you really didn't have her do anything that really showed her off as much of a threat. Now, I know some people may disagree with that, but again, that's just my honest to God opinion. So if I was to, and furthermore, I have to say that the subplot, if you will, that took place in Sonic Universe, which was Journey to the East, or Journey to the West, or whatever it was a little bit better, but not by much, than the Iron Dominion was. And the fact that, you know, you teased fans at a possible Sonic gaming relationship at the end of 207, and it never came to be. Instead, it was more about cluing you in that Sonic and Sally were going to get back together, which even to me, when I knew Sally was going to do this flirtatious, as I put it, relationship with Monkey Kong, that she was eventually going to end up, that was basically more than just a catalyst to get her and Sonic back together. So, in my opinion, my honest to God opinion, you know, I have to say that even though it was an enjoyable one, even though it was kind of enjoyable, it wasn't the best that they've done. And you know, if I was to do a top 5, if you will, on what is the best and what's not the best, it would be kind of a hard sell to kind of do. It'd be kind of a hard sell. If you know what I mean. It would basically be kind of a hard sell. Hold on for a sec.